Exhibit A that this is the amount that we would pay through 2023. We do have the option prior to July 1st of each year of reaching out to the school and renegotiating that amount if we see a significant cost increase for our officers. But this number that's here is based off of our the entry-level officer. Typically, it's an officer who's been with us 3 to 6 years who takes this position, so they're one of the entry-level positions with the city. But they are an experienced officer who's shown that they can be trusted and relied on, because in a lot of ways they are operating completely independently from the rest of the department for many hours during the week. And any questions, council?
Seeing no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
We have an agreement number.
A15-2019.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve agreement A15-2019. The agreement with Weber School District for law enforcement services, excuse me, as discussed.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Swanson that we approve agreement A15-2019 with Weber School District for law enforcement services.
I'll second.
A second by Councilman Barker. Begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item, in a previous council meeting, we were discussing members of the General Plan Committee. There were 3 in attendance that volunteered to be included in that committee: Julie Anderson, Megan Sanders, and Stephanie Casey. So I'd submit their names for your approval to be included in the General Plan Committee.
Just need a motion, is that all we need?
Yeah.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve those names.
It's been moved that we approve those names for the
Second.
General Plan Committee. Have been seconded. Begin the voting with Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes. I assume you're still on.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And council, just by way of information, I believe our first meeting with that group is scheduled for the 31st of this month.
Great. Invitations will go out, and we'll begin that process to update the general plan, particularly in the moderate income housing requirement by the state of Utah. Next item is major projects update. Presenter will be John Call, our city manager and attorney.
So council, as mentioned last time, there's 2 areas that we're talking about in this major project update. The city's been receiving increasing requests for information on some of these larger developments that are coming down the pipeline, or at least the requests for these larger developments. And so we've added them to the list of these major projects, because even though they're not pushed by the city, they are something that comes to the council because most of them are policy involved decisions. But the first one, Monro Boulevard, which is essentially 800 East, runs from 1500 North all the way to the top of the city, or at least to Mountain Road or Skyline Drive, depending on what you call it, up in the development that's called the Cove. We've bought every property on that road and closed the account out with the county. We ended up, the estimate for that project was about $2 million. We ended up spending about 1.4 of that, 1.5, something like that. We had several property owners who opted not to sell their property, and that's one of the requirements with that money is if the landowner doesn't want to sell and the project isn't happening in the next 3 or 4 years, then the money can't be spent to buy that property. So it can't be used for condemnation. That money can be used for condemnation when the project is happening in the next 3 to 4 years. So that there's some rules, but we did have several property owners who opted not to sell voluntarily. The other stipulation that the council put on that was that the road be designed so that we didn't require any houses to be torn down as part of the project. And Matt and Meridian Engineering did a good job of doing that. So we have an alignment that doesn't require any houses to be torn down or moved or anything like that. It did require a few modifications to the road as we went along, as we started looking at the planning setbacks, and the road got shifted in a couple spots. But all in all, it was a very successful project. If I remember right, the city's match on that money was, I think, 8%. So of the $2 million, or I guess of the $2.2 million, just less than $200,000 of it was city money that was spent. The rest was WACOG funds, which is the county has a local option gas tax that helps fund that. Or maybe it's not the gas tax. There's a Weber County tax that helps fund that source of money. And then the next project.
John?
Yes.
The Campbell barn, isn't that in the path?
It is.
So that's not part of that money, or is that part of the money?
So we purchased that property.
Right.
And so that barn is included in that acquisition. So we
But
paid the
moving
Campbells
it
for it.
is not?
Moving it is not. That essentially what we did is we paid the family for the loss of the structure, and in the agreement we reached with them, it says if we take it and move it to Barker Park as had been recommended by the Barker Park Committee, we could do that. But if we don't do that with it, then the family gets to take it and move it where they want to. So, and we'll be getting some bids and some of the work started on that this year to find out exactly how much it's going to cost to move. Understanding that it'll be going in before the rest of the park is finished, but we have to move it because the Campbells sold the rest of their property or are under contract with a developer for some single-family homes in that area, and they'll be putting the road in. So we need to get that barn out of the way so the road doesn't affect it.
So and the money we had allotted for that was that $2 million, right?
Yeah, I believe that's about
And we've spent about 1.4. That extra 600,000 can't go towards moving that, or it can't be because of that.
It can only be used for property acquisition, not for project costs. And so a project cost would include relocation of structures and things like that.
Thank you.
So, the next item is the debris basin up on 3100, just as you head up the divide. That project is 95% complete. The only things they have left to do is to put the silt fences further up the channel. So east of the power lines, they're putting in, they call them silt fences, but they're really debris fences. They'll catch larger rocks, anything from a watermelon to a golf cart size vehicle, rock, and so that it doesn't come down. Part of the problem that happened in the 90s was the channel got plugged with debris, and then the water backed up behind it, and then it came through. So this would help eliminate the risk of that channel getting clogged again, so that anything that comes down can just go into the basins and work the way that the basins are designed, or the basin. But they have sprayed it with a hydroseed. Those things will start coming up soon, and we're hoping in the next little while it'll start to look more like the land around it as time goes on.
Did they haul off all the spoils that were below?
They hauled out a bunch of material. I think they hauled out about 60,000 yards worth of material. Some of it went across the street.
Right.
It was good enough quality that it worked for an underground or sub road base material. And the landowner, who is the developer of the piece to the south of 3100, when they gave us the property, kept the right for the materials. A bunch of the material, though, was sold to other contractors who took it out across the valley and other places. So I think the biggest rock they found up there was about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, is my understanding. So there were some pretty large pieces up there. The street projects, that's one that comes up every year. With the transportation utility fee and some of the other things we've been doing, we've been getting closer to where we want to be on our road maintenance. Many of a good example is a couple of years ago when we had the rain and then the freeze and the rain and the freeze. Several of our neighboring cities lost a lot of roads and ended up with a lot of patchwork going in that we didn't deal with because we've been trying to stay on top of the crack sealing and things like that. This is just more of those projects going on. As the council approved a few months back or a month or so back, we actually bid our project with Pleasant View this year, and so we ended up getting somewhere between a 10 and a 20% discount. And so we were able to extend our project a little further than we had originally anticipated and get a little more road miles done. And I think every indication is that was successful and that we'll be doing that again next year. It worked good for both of us, from what I understand.
John, of that 500,000, what's the breakdown between B and C funds and the utility fee?
So the majority of it is B and C funds.
Okay.
I don't know the exact dollar amount, partly because we've been saving the utility fee for the city's portion of the future road projects. So tying back into the way we use our road impact fees. So we have three sources of incomes for road. The B and C road funds, which is the state money that we pay in gas taxes. The transportation utility fee, which is a monthly fee that every homeowner in the city pays. And then the transportation utility or impact fee, which new homes pay to buy into our road system. We've been setting aside the utility fund, the utility fees to cover the city's portion of what we have to put into the new road projects, the 400 East project specifically, to then be paired with the impact fee money, and the hopes pairing that with the grant money that we've received for those projects is that there won't be any general fund money used. It'll all come out of those two dedicated funds, and right now it's looking like there'll be excess, meaning we won't deplete those funds all the way down. We'll have those to maybe either start another project or to increase our maintenance in the year after we finish that 450 East expansion. The council last budget year had approved us to start the construction of a water tank. The original location selected ended up having some what they call undocumented fill down to about 16 feet deep, which means that the geotechnical engineers wouldn't certify that the ground would hold the tank unless you dug down 16 feet below the foundations, pulled all that stuff out, and then brought in engineered fill, compacted it, and put your tank on top of that. That was going to make it cost prohibitive. So we're looking at a different tank location to see if that could be done cheaper. Essentially, the tank will cost us the same no matter where it's built around the city. It's the site preparation work that would have made the project go over budget. So we're looking at moving that over in between Fruitland and Mountain roads by our existing, we call it the Randall Reservoir. We like to have the tanks next to each other because we've already got all the main lines and the pump lines in the area, and it's much cheaper to put them closer to each other than to add a new one a couple miles away. And so we're doing the groundwork on that. Over there's a concern with fault lines. You know, the Wasatch Fault runs along the mountains, and so we just have to make sure that we're not within the wrong distance to a fault line or a fault trace line. So, any questions on that? Okay. This is the amphitheater. I know the council's aware of this. This is just kind of a summary of where we are to date. As of right now, of the $756,000 that the council had approved for what we've called phase 2 of the amphitheater, we've spent about $156,000 of that, which means there's still $600,000 to be spent. In the budget year, we had anticipated that half the money would be spent before June 30th and the other half would be spent after June 30th. So we had rolled over about half of that budget, about $378,000. It turns out we only spent $156,000. So we'll be coming back to the council to ask for a budget amendment to roll over the additional $200,000 into this year's budget to finish that out. It'll still be capped at that $756 that the council had approved. It's just spanning the two budget years. We had originally hoped to get the whole project done by June 30th, but because of some delays, we didn't quite get there. So, any questions about that? Okay. We just talked about the 2550 detention basin. The engineers, the environmental engineer, has basically said that they need an answer by the end of this month, which puts us on the July 23rd meeting. So that's the plan for there. It'd be helpful, council, if you have any questions you anticipate needing technical answers to for the engineer to respond to. Be helpful to get those in an email form this week so we can try and get an answer next week and then be ready for the discussion on the following Tuesday. Any questions about that? Okay. The next one's the 450 East Widening. That's the big road project. It's still on track for our spring construction date. So in about 8 months from now, we still have quite a bit of property acquisition to do, as well as some design work. The design work is holding up the acquisitions because as we hit the steep driveways, as Matt Hardvixen had talked about in our meetings, we have to make sure that we're buying enough of a construction easement that we can rebuild the driveways to make them still functional. As well as we've been doing some design work out here. Based on a conversation we had a couple months ago, council, about this intersection at 450 East, which is just east of the, I don't know what you'd call it now, where the furniture store was, that is no longer there, but it tees into the old Pam Trimble homes, and then Fizz is directly west of there. We're realigning that Smith's entrance, that Fizz/Smith/Ace entrance to line up with 450 East for safety reasons. And because of that, we're doing a little bit of additional design work there to make sure it accommodates and works good, as well as talking with the property owners to make sure that we're not doing something that messes up their commercial businesses or their plazas. As of right now, it looks like everyone's on board and we can move forward with the acquisitions. But that's one that, in fact, you might see some of the dirt work for that entrance starting here in the next couple of months. The idea would be to get it done before UDOT starts their project so that we don't have contractors working on top of each other. So, but we will, when we get the final design approved, we'll bring it back as part of a council meeting so the council can see what's being proposed and just so you can get any questions answered you may have.
John?
Yes.
Where's happening with Wells Fargo?
So as of right now, Wells Fargo will stay where they're at, but the ATM and the drive-through will be relocated so it's directly west of the Ace Hardware, and there won't be a drive-through, it'll just be ATMs. So Wells Fargo Corporate likes having a presence near a grocery store, so that'll satisfy that need, but we'll still have the walk-up service at the existing Wells Fargo building. But they will reconfigure how people walk into that building as part of this. So, any other questions? And then the last item is just kind of the catch-all. We're starting to work on the Loman View bathrooms. It's not really a major project, but it's kind of it's one that's been on the council's mind. Most likely those won't be completed till the spring. We're trying to do as much work in-house as we can to save on cost to make it fall in budget. And then the other one that's kind of a big thing is the council approved the money for the police station feasibility study. We'll get the RFP process started on that in the coming month or so that we can get an architectural firm and a group who knows public safety buildings to come in and look at what we've got, look at what the city needs, and then make a recommendation on the size of building and some of those details. It won't be a fully designed facility, but they'll say, you need this many square feet per officer and these type of facilities for the court staff and for the officers. And then we're also, as part of that, asking them to plan for build out of the city, to just make sure that we don't build a building that we grow out of again. As a reminder, the building the police are in right now is 60 years old, and has 3 or 4 additions onto it. And there's some mechanical issues that we struggle with on a monthly basis, that we have to do special things that most people don't have to. And if you're not in the commercial world a lot, typically about 50 years is how long a commercial building is good for. So we're beyond that life. But as the council, I'm sure, is keenly aware, we don't have enough money to build something brand new, and so the council will have to look at, based on the feasibility study, how big a priority it is and if there's a way to fund that project. Any other projects the council wants to talk about that are city-funded projects or that we should bring up for next time? Okay. Then I will we'll move into these projects. So these are kind of the larger, most of them are multifamily projects or large master plan projects that the planning department has been approached about, and they've progressed to the point where they're essentially scheduling public meetings and starting the discussion. The first one is what we call Cooperstown. That's down just south of the Walker Cinema and the Animal Hospital. What they're asking for is apartment complexes or apartment buildings right there. It also requires some boundary adjusting with Ogden City to make this project work, or to keep it all in one jurisdiction. And that's something that we've reached out to Ogden, and they seem initially okay with it. They have expressed some concerns over height, which have also been expressed by our planners. The idea of not putting too tall of buildings right next to the single-family homes or the single-level homes that are just directly south of there. It's what's the politically correct term? It's a trailer court.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mobile home. Yeah.
Mobile home
Park.
Yes. But it's not your typical one. It's fairly well maintained. The folks who run that keep it well groomed, and if you drive through there, it's in really good shape. It's not your stereotypical trailer park. So, any questions about that one? We don't have any final design documents or a request coming back to the council anytime soon. It'll probably be a couple months before the council sees anything. And on all of these projects, just as a reminder, these are things the council really has final say on what gets to go in. That's why they've come up quite often and bounced back and forth with the council and the planning commission, because it's a lot of back and forth and figuring out what works best. The next one is the Village at Prominence Point. We've received a request for phase 3 of the townhomes, which would go just on the east side of the lodge, which is the new residential care facility that's been built on 1700 North. That one was going to be on Planning Commission next week, but has been delayed. Rob has some questions about the number of townhomes that they're asking for and comparing that to the development agreement. So that might come back from the developers a request on what the council feels is appropriate for the number of townhomes there. Any questions about that one? We still don't have a timeline on when any apartments would be started. But the townhomes the northmost townhomes are under construction and have started. In fact, I know Ryan's been out there inspecting the road. So,
almost daily.
Yeah. The next one it's what's called the ranches. So just south of the Montessori school is the actual development that's called the Ranches, which are some for rent townhomes. They're 2 garage units, and it's about 4 or 5 units right next to each other. That group is looking at expanding to the west on the Shooting Star Ranch or Double Lot Ranch, depending on when you first moved to North Ogden. And that's a request that is just in the beginning stages with the planning department and the planning commission. It hasn't come to the council for final approval yet, although I think it has been discussed as part of that pond relocation discussion, the detention facility relocation. Any questions about that, council? Okay, and then the last one is the annexation that's on the council meeting in 2 weeks for what we call the North Cove. It hasn't been given an official name from the landowner yet, but it's roughly 200 acres. About 180 of it is privately owned. About 20 of it is owned by Rocky Mountain Power for the power corridor. And the developer was in here, I think, about 8 months ago at a joint work session where they handed out some examples of the types of structures they were looking at. They had asked for some twin home units, which you might call a duplex, but a twin home is typically what they call them when they're for sale units, as opposed to for rent units. And then they did have I think they had a townhome concept included in there as well. But that, in my opinion, that project is not anywhere near approval. With the annexation request that's come through, they have asked for the MPC zone, but they haven't given the planning staff any real idea of what they're after as far as development agreement goes. And so I think what'll end up coming to the council for a recommendation from the planning commission will be to not annex the property at this time until we get that done. Or if we want to go ahead and annex it in, that we do the HB2 zone, which is what the Cove is, which is essentially 20,000 square foot lots. And it would match what the Cove currently is. And then if the developer wanted to ask for a rezone, they'd have to come back to the council at a future date. We haven't got an official word from the developer on what their preference is. If they don't annex within a certain amount of time of starting the process, they have to start all over again. So I think that's right now, at least from the staff perspective, the recommendation of the planning commission is going to be to either not bring it in or to apply one of those hillside protection zones as a recommendation, because that's what the hillside study the city did about 15 years ago recommended as a lower density up there. It did talk about, in that hillside study, about allowing for clustering, and I think that's what the developer is most likely going to come into the council with, which is same number of density per acres up there, but allowing the units to be closer together to leave more open space and to not make as many cuts in the hillside as they put in roads and things as they head up the hill. So, any questions about any of those projects or any others that you might have heard of? Okay.
Thank you, council. Thank you, John. Item 6, discussion or action to consider approving changes to the North Ogden City organizational chart. Presenter will be John Call, city manager and attorney.
So, council, the organizational chart is actually something that's included in the personnel policy. This is the current chart, and it's really small and really hard to read. But as it's set up right now, there are 3 job positions that report to the city council. One is the city recorder, one is the city administrator or manager, and the other is the city attorney. And in reviewing this with the mayor and the department heads, I think that there actually might be some more connections the city council should have with staff, as well as I think the general trend or the way that Utah is moving, based on the state auditor's recommendations, is separating some of the financial responsibilities so that you don't have everyone reporting to the same person. It's actually part of the reason, if you didn't know, in the Utah code, the city recorder is actually in charge of the audits for the city, and the treasurer is in charge of all the city's balances and things. And the person can't be the same individual. So in that mind, or in that approach, what we're recommending is, and it's hard to see, but it's adding a fourth person that reports directly to the mayor and council with no oversight from anybody else, and that's the city treasurer. The idea being that the treasurer doesn't have to answer to the finance director, not because there's any concerns there, but just to help improve the likelihood, or to reduce the likelihood of any sort of fraud, because it doesn't require the person who signs the check to report to the person who's asking for the check. It just separates it a little bit, helps with some financial separation. With that in mind, we've also helped try and clarify some of the positions. There are several people who have more than one job. Annette is a good example of that. She's the city recorder and the HR director. And so she has, as well as really kind of the administrative office person, I don't know. But so the idea is to show the chain of command in each of those trees as they come through. So even though right now we don't have a planning department director, or a department head, or a building department head, they report to me. Currently, I'm the department head for those departments. The idea is that we're still building in the structure, the position, so that if we ever need to add it, we don't have to amend this. But it's essentially built, and we tried to color coordinate it so you can see who's reporting to who, and help kind of distinguish that. One thing that we really want to emphasize with this is the way that I feel about the way the city should be managed is that the city council should feel entirely empowered to reach out to all the department heads and give direction to the department heads as they see fit, because the department heads are capable individuals who can, if they need help or have questions, they can talk to the mayor or me about what's being asked for, and we can work on it with the council member. But the one thing that we would ask is that the council members not give frontline staff, the people mowing the lawns or things, direction on what they're supposed to do. Some cities have seen issues with council members showing up to parks and telling the parks crew to stop mowing where they're at and move to a different location. And it puts the parks crews in a rough situation, because the person who is an elected official is giving them direct instructions, and they don't want to defy them. So and I know the council has been really good about this kind of stuff, but it's always any direction to staff should go through the department head, and just want to reinforce that as part of this discussion. But essentially clear up that there's these 4 positions that report directly to the council and the mayor. And this isn't really before you tonight for approval. It's just kind of the beginning of the discussion. See if there's any concerns or questions you have. And then if you're okay with it, we'll bring it back as part of the personnel policy, in which we're kind of scheduling to update in a couple months to bring back the final update for that. So anything the council would like us to change or modify, and like I said, there's several months. So if something pops in your head, we can change that later. And with this, because we're taking an employee and particularly a kind of an important employee out of the direction of our finance director, out of his umbrella, we've talked, the mayor and I, about adding a different department under his oversight, so that he doesn't feel like we're trying to take away his role in the city, as well as he has some training in that other area, which is the planning department. He actually went to school and has training in planning, so the idea would be he could be involved there, which would help us with this code rewrite that we're doing this year as well. So, any questions about that, or? Okay.
If there are suggestions that come up after reviewing this for whatever time period we have selected, please get in touch with John so that we can consider any other situations that you feel would be appropriate or need to be changed. We feel like this would put us in better compliance with taking care of our fiscal responsibilities. There's no questions, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Discussion or action to consider giving North Shore pool passes to individual families in the Family Promise Program. Presenter will be Councilmember Phil Swanson.
Council, this isn't my idea. I want that to be clear. It's come up. I know Julie Anderson had the idea on Facebook, as well as several other residents throughout the city. I thought it was a worthy idea that we ought to consider as a council to, the next time the Family Promise families make their cycle through the old fire station where we put them up for a week, I thought it would be a great thing for, as Julie and others said, to give them a free night at the pool and allow them, they're on hard times as it is, and our pool's expensive. All pools are expensive. But so anyway, that's the idea behind it. Thank Julie and others who had the idea, and I propose that we do that. Thoughts and comments?
I'm fine with it.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, do you need an official motion on that?
Yes.
I'll move then that we approve a night of passes for the individual families in the Family Promise Program the next time they cycle through North Ogden.
It's been moved by Councilman Swanson that we approve North Shore passes for individual families that are in the Family Promise Program.
Second.
And second by Councilman Turner. We'll begin the voting with Councilman.
Well, is this just for the one time, each family, or?
Yeah, just one time. It's not a season pass.
Okay. I'm okay with giving the Family Promise a season pass. But
They're only there for, I think, a week at a
Right.
time, I think.
But I mean, it'd be a different family every time. So every time we get a new family, do we have to come and make a new motion?
That's a good thought. You want to make a substitute motion? You want me to amend mine?
Whichever. If we're not gonna make money off of them anyway, so why not help them out?
Okay.
I'd say every time we get a family, give them the opportunity to go to the night of the pool.
So a season pass to Family Promise that they can use for whatever families as they move through?
John, you're deep in thought.
No, yeah. I was just trying to, because typically our season passes are assigned to someone, but essentially we would find out how many family members they had and we'd give them a pass to go in.
Right.
Yeah. That's why yes.
I don't know
see
the
what you're
best.
saying.
I don't know if it's a season pass is what we'd call it, or just
Provide them with,
provide them
so-
a
so
voucher
they can go
to-
swimming one of the
family-
nights they're
right.
here. Yeah.
I'll amend my motion then to change it that whenever the Family Promise families are at our facility, that they have a night of free swimming with their families at North Shore.
Okay, it's been amended to include
Thank
the
you.
families at the Family Promise Program to have a night at the North Shore Pool, free of charge.
Well, I'll second that one. I didn't know if you.
Okay. The second by Councilman Barker. We'll begin the voting with Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Sorry, Julie, you only get one. Go ahead, I'm just kidding.
This is a big deal. Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to let you guys know, I forgot to add it onto the end of my comments in the opening, The North Ogden Junior Posse won the whole competition the night of the 3rd. The kids were amazing. And so they head out this Saturday, the 13th, to the downtown rodeo grounds to compete again. And they are very excited. They feel like they have a good chance of bringing the trophy home this year. So I just kind of want to let you know that they start at 6. It's $2 to get in.
This Saturday?
This Saturday. So if you're out and about, need something to do with your kids or your family, come on down and see these kids. They're amazing kids. Thank you.
You could tell they could win hands down.
Randy Wynn, 2412 Barker Parkway. As you were discussing these major projects and future projects, and talking about the Cooperstown, I think you were looking at some large buildings that would cause the neighbors to think they were being looked down on. I also have the concern just for our city with 3- and 4-story buildings that might, as the more we do, affect the profile of our whole city, where we become, we get more dense, but it also affects the flavor of our suburban town, and I don't think we should look for density to the point where we give up that flavor that we have now. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to comments from council, mayor, and staff. Councilman Turner?
I have nothing right now.
Okay. Councilman Barker?
Yeah, so 4th of July, I'm glad it's over. I think Councilman Swanson and we did great with the fireworks, turning off the wind right at 10 o'clock.
That was crazy.
Yeah, as soon as 10 o'clock hit, we turned it off and it went good. The other question I had, I saw we had advertised the events coordinator position. Is that closed now? And when do interviews start? I've just had people asking.
It is. We had about 18 people apply,
Good.
and interviews will be starting probably next week,
Okay, thanks.
the 18th, and that whispers in my ear.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Councilman Swanson?
Couple of things, several things, quick things. John, can you get us in the presentation that was made by Zions Bank, a lot of the major retailers have their formularies that they use, certain population density within a certain radius. Can you get us the 1, 3, 5, 10 mile radius population from, say, 450 and 2600?
Okay.
And also the 10 and 15 minute drive population densities. Those were the other two criteria that they seem to be using a lot on the population densities. The other one I have, Julie, how did the horses do earlier in the parade? Do you know?
We had no problem at all.
So they did good following the flag and.
Following the flag, and everybody was very respectful. We did have a couple of papas that were thrown.
Okay.
But I believe the Kiwanis people, not the Kiwanis, is it Shriners or Kiwanis, were on motorcycles. And man, they were right on top of it, which was really nice. And people were very gracious at 2000 to pick up their chairs and spread for us so we could head down to Orion so that we could do it. And it was an amazing.
Good.
It really was. Thank you so much for letting us do that. It makes it, the only bad thing was the flyover. We had several horses that were not quite prepared for that.
That was loud, yeah.
And so.
That was loud.
Stayed on.
There were some kids that weren't prepared for that flyover. And the last thing on the fireworks, Ryan mentioned, I have to give credit to you guys because I headed out at 9:57 to run over and grab the mic and cancel the fireworks because the wind was still howling over there. And they were supposed to text me, and I'm watching my phone, and all of a sudden the fireworks went off, and they weren't going anywhere. They were just floating right there as if somebody hit a switch. So whoever hit the switch saved me from getting in front of a bunch of people and saying no more fireworks. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilwoman Stoker?
Just a couple of things, too. I know last week or so we discussed about the night lights or the dark lights on the lodge, on talking to them. I don't know that, has anything been done or followed up on it? Because a person did say that it's still they're still bright?
So they technically comply with our ordinance. They did look at adding some shielding to those, but it would void the manufacturer's warranty. And so we're still working with them on some possible solutions. The head isn't designed that it can be tilted. It will help a little bit when the little cottages are built, although it might also cause a reaction because the people who are renting the cottages will get the majority of the brightness and push back against the lights as well. What we're getting from the owner is not go away, leave us alone, but it's not their top priority. And we've been pushing them for really about 3 months on it, and there's nothing we can legally force them to do because they technically comply with the ordinance.
Okay. And then just super job to all of those who were involved in Cherry Days, the staff and all the hard work and the hours that they put in. I thought it was really well, and the flag was amazing to see the drone coverage of it. It was pretty amazing to see it go down the
Very cool.
boulevard. So great job, everybody. That's all.
Thanks to you, Cheryl, and Lyman, for your chairmanship of that event again. And
Yeah, Lyman does really well, doesn't he? Is what I tell him.
I seem to understand who's behind who.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Okay, John?
Just so you're aware, council, we are circling the wagons with those involved in Cherry Days to come up with some additional ideas. I know a couple of you have sent me some ideas on things you'd like changed for next year. We're trying to put them in a list so that it can be handed on while it's fresh. So if you can think of anything, shoot it to me or Tiffany or the mayor or all three of us, and we'll make sure it gets included in those discussions.
The police firefighter softball game. Let's bring it back.
Okay. I know, and this is, so my dad grew up in a really small town in Idaho, and he came to the softball game that we had, 3 years ago? And he's come to Cherry Days every day since then. They live out west in a different community, and they come to Cherry Days because he felt like it was a great community activity and has come back. And so I think a softball game or a kickball game or something would be a lot of fun. The hard thing with the officers is we'll need to get probably invite some from other jurisdictions to come help play because we have quite a few who are out enforcing our rules at the same time.
Sheriff lives in our city.
Sheriff does, yep. Get him to put together a captain or a team, be the captain.
Imagine you get search and rescue involved.
Yeah, but and that might be a good thing. We just get it's the emergency personnel, and we do a
Stack team. Yep.
okay. That's a okay. We didn't get many complaints about parking, but we did have at least a couple cars that didn't follow our signs about parking. We've been talking about what to do moving forward as we do some of these free things this summer. The community band concert and things. We're going to be dealing with parking issues. It costs us about somewhere between $60 and $100 to rent barricades, as well as the time to pick them up, put them out, and things like that. So we're looking at some other options. I know that the neighbors don't want permanent signs, but we need to probably come to the council and figure out what the council is going to recommend we do in that situation for time-wise, because of the cost to rent them all the time, or even the cost to install permanent ones, and that sort of stuff. So if you have any thoughts on that, it'd be helpful to know your feelings as we prepare for that. And then there are some posters up for the community band concert, as well as music in the park, which will be some live performances that'll start earlier in the evening and finish up before dark. Well, at least now before dark, and then they might trickle into dark as the days get shorter. But watch for those coming up as free community events for people to be involved in.
Where will those be posted at, John? On the website or?
So on the Parks and Rec website, the dates have been posted. There's posters on the doors at the city building, or in this building, I guess. But then also Parks and Rec. Some of the performers have been scheduled, but they don't have all the slots nailed down completely, so they haven't released the names of the performers yet. But that is the money that, if you remember, Tiffany took that $18,000 that we get because of our population. It's $1 for every person. That's the money that's funding this, and not all of it's going to it, but a portion of that money is funding these free music experiences. So add them to your schedule and come and enjoy them at the park. And then the only other one was the movies in the park. A week and a half ago, we did our first one, the Dragons 2, How to Train Your Dragons 2. And it was okay. The sound was a little spotty. I know 2 of the council members were there, and several of us, I think, took our earphones out and were listening to it on the speakers on the phones, which are much quieter, and it works better. They didn't crack and skip as much as the headphones did. So we might be looking to figure out a way to make that work. In reality, even with those little speakers on, we weren't in violation of the ordinance because it wasn't more than 65 decibels at the property line for parks. And so that's probably the direction we're going to be heading is just a quieter speaker system as opposed to using the earphones. They just don't seem to work as good as we'd hoped they did.
And
So
it was great, too.
it was fun.
It was a fun night.
And that's it.
Okay. Annette?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
And sorry, Mayor, I don't usually talk this much. I've been doing everything.
That's okay. Just by way of information, Council, Lieutenant Bill Ashelman will retire at the end of the month, and plans are now in place to make the adjustments to the police department. And so we have an officer in reserve that we can send to the academy and replace him. So and there'll be some announcements regarding his official replacement, but he's decided to retire and go off and do other things. Other than that, I have no other items. Thanks to everyone who attended this evening. Appreciate your attendance, your input. And I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been a motion to adjourn and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.